You're listening to the God Life Culture podcast, where faith
and what's trending collide. Welcome to the latest episode of the God Life Culture podcast. This is Eddie.
What's up, everyone? This is Miguel, and we are so excited that you are tuned in for another episode of the God Life Culture podcast. If this is your first time listening or watching, we want to say welcome to the God Life Culture podcast. We hope you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode, and we hope that you enjoy today's conversation. If you are a returning listener, welcome back, and thank you so much for choosing to listen to our podcast, and we hope our conversation today, just like all our other ones, right, bless you, encourage you, uplift you, make you laugh, make you think, reflect, and thank you once again for tuning in to another week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is the week. We've been mentioning it the last two episodes. This family conference that we have, As For Me in My House, with Priscila Berrios. If you haven't gone back and listened to the episodes, we had her on now. If you haven't sent us your questions, feel free and do so. You have a little time left, and hopefully we can fit that in so that when you hear the episode back that we're going to have recorded for you guys, you maybe get some answers. You know, we're really excited about this. We've been speaking to a couple of people about it, and anytime we bump heads with somebody, we're like, hey, are you going? What do you have any questions? Send it our way, and we're just looking forward to everything great that will come out of this weekend.
Absolutely. So it's the As For Me in My House family conference. It's March 10th through the 12th. Come out. Friday's the live podcast at 8 p.m. Saturday, we have our two breakout conferences, 1 p.m. for the adults, 6 p.m. for youth. And Sunday, Priscilla will be with us at our Sunday service in the Word. And, once again, it's just an opportunity for us to get resources, tools, information, strategies. And also, I think it's a good way for us to see that, at times you can feel like we're the only ones struggling. We're the only ones with questions. We're the only ones with doubts. I think this is really good for us to see that it's not only us. There are other people that may have similar struggles or similar doubts or similar questions when it comes to the family. So definitely we hope to see you there for our conference. And, it's funny because on the way here to record today, I heard, I was listening to the radio and they were talking about this guy that had tried something for a long time, many times, right? Okay. And it was his road test to get his license. This individual, he's actually from Poland, right, has failed his test 192 times.
Wow.
He started when he was 33. He's been 17 years later, right?
Do the math.
He's 50. And he has failed yet again, right? So in listening to that, right, first of all, it brought me back to when I took my road test, right? And it brought me back to that era of my life. Okay. But it's also just the idea of, dang, how many times, do you fail, right? And how many times do you have to talk yourself back into or prepare yourself to take it again and try again, so it brought me back to just my road test, experience. And, I was one of those individuals. I was a G driving. I knew how to drive, since I can't even go. Listen, I took this test 3 times.
Oh, okay. There we go.
I passed on my third time. Yes, I passed on my third time.
But now wait, because I know wait, give me a second. Because I know I grew up in the city. City life is different than suburban life. Yeah. So we see on the TV that people that live in the suburbs have car ed in high school, they take driving classes in high school. Did you have that, or did you have to do your own private situation?
I took driver's ed.
Oh, that's what did I call it? Car ed? You see, that goes to show you. Driver's ed.
Driver's ed. I took driver's ed. And I got my license a year early. That was the reason why I took it. So at the time, they don't do this anymore. If you took driver's ed and, you know, did all of that, one day was you would sit down in a class and like learn about driving and all that rules, laws. And then the next day you would actually go and drive with 3 other people.
To get your license.
Yes. So I did that for I don't know how many months. Right. At the end of that, you would then just schedule your road test whenever you wanted. So,
okay. When I thought that was your road test.
Yeah, no. So at the end, you know, because I fit, you know, the cutoff and the deadline whenever they did it, I got my license, my full license a year early. I would have gotten like a junior license. I got my full license earlier. But it was a journey for me, right? And I think for me, this
is you at 17?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
17. You know,
let's talk about it.
It was the people. It was
the people in the car with you or the people on the
road?
No,
the person conducting the test.
Oh, okay. The instructor.
Right? The instructor. I knew, you know, when I'm standing online and you kind of see the instructors lined up and I'm like, please don't let it be that one. Please don't let it be that. And then it just so happens to be, oh, guess who's coming to your car? Who's going to be the instructor? That one. And it was just like the minute, you know, that individual got in, it was just like attitude and, you know, they were grumpy. And I feel like that had a lot to do with it. The second time they tricked me and wanted me to, you know, turn and make a left when it was a one-way. And I didn't know they could do that. So I'm here thinking they're my instructor. I need to follow everything they tell me to do. I can't. So I'm like, was about to make the left turn. I'm like, maybe they blocked off the road because this, you know, this is my 17-year-old mind. I don't know. I was just like, obey the instructor. And he literally wanted me to tell him I can't make a left because it's a one-way. And then he would have told me to make a right. So when he saw I was going to make the left, he was kind of like, yeah, just drive back. You know, it's a one-way.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the third time, it was easy.
It was easy. So the first 2 times you had the same instructor?
No. 2 different people.
So you got 2 rotten eggs.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then the third time, and it was just crazy because I knew how to drive. I was comfortable driving. It was just one of those things where the first time, I don't remember what it was the first time. Second time. The third time, I didn't even I was about to do my 3-point turn. He was like, oh, you got it. You don't need to finish it. I was like, oh.
Okay, good.
Then the next one, I was about to parallel park. Not even all the way in, and he was like, oh, you got it, like it's good. You know,
that's great. So you didn't even do the whole test. He just was nice that day.
Yeah, like what he basically was kind of like, if you continue doing this for your parallel park, you're gonna make it, so why bother, you know, like continuing.
He had foresight.
So tell us about your experience, because you were in the city, so you didn't drive, you walked everywhere.
Right? Or
public
took the transportation
train or subway.
So
what was your experience like coming to Long Island having to drive?
So what wound up happening, I think it was, I randomly went, I had a friend of mine who was she was going to go get her permit. And back then you had to go to the DMV and do your test. So she didn't want to go alone. So I went with her, and then I'm like, ya que estoy aquí, I'm already here. Let me try it. Bam, passed it. Never opened that book once. Then I had set a goal for myself. At 21, I think it was. I think I was like, I'm 21. I think it's time I learn. I think it's time I get my driver's license. So I did one of those driving school things. Did a couple of weeks there, and then got my test, passed on my first try, and ever since then I've been killing it on the road.
I remember when you first started your lights, you never turned them on. I do remember a few.
No, you know what happened? What happened was that I wasn't used to the new fancy cars, and I, you know, so what
your
happened?
First car.
So what happened was that before I got a car, I used to rent, and by the grace of God, even though I used to always go for the most basic car, like, you know, they have like different hierarchies of plans or whatever classes to purchase. I was broke, I was young, I was like, I'm just gonna go for the cheapest one. They always upgraded me to these. I remember one of the cars that I had, which is the one you're talking about, was a Charger, a brand new Charger when they first came out. And I was like, yo, this is nice. But I didn't know all the gizmos and gadgets and all the buttons. That's why there were times where
I used to call you or
my
text
lights
you
were
be
off.
Like, your lights are off.
Yeah, or something like that. But you can't come for me for that.
No, I'm not. I'm just
it's
saying.
like a new toy. You don't really know all the ins and outs. And then every week it was a new car because I didn't have a car yet. So if we were going to something in Jersey or we had an event somewhere else, I had to rent another car and there was a whole new thing I had to learn. So, but it was good. I enjoyed
totally
that.
Forgot about that era.
Yeah. I had a whole era. Let's rewind that.
Yeah.
Era. And then after that I got my little Hyundai.
Yeah. And it's just funny how for some people it's something so easy, right?
Yeah.
The idea of taking the test, they pass it and it's done. You know, then for others the journey is so much longer, right?
Yes.
And there's nerves and there's, you know, all that plays into it as well.
I think what would be very interesting is if we could have heard the whole story about the gentleman that kept failing, to see if he kept failing on the same thing. You know, because I think that there is possibility, you know, it's true. And even I remember being on the line waiting to get doing my driver's license as well, with a certain instructors that you're looking at, you're like, oh, I don't know, that person kind of looks grumpy or whatever. And then and because of that, sometimes you're faced with people that are more strict or less lenient or less understanding that does screw you over. You know, we see that everywhere. We see that in the workplace. We see that at school when you have a professor who is not understanding, who is not lenient and all that other stuff. So then there's blame on the instructor, the professor, the whoever. But if this individual keeps failing in the same exact thing, it's like, what's right. Why is it not clicking that you're not able to do?
Because
you do. You looked it up.
He didn't fail his test, the driving portion.
Okay.
It was the theoretical exam that you take before. So basically, it's similar to like a permit test. Mm-hmm. So he's failed that test 192 times, not the actual driving test. He hasn't even gotten to be able to take the driving test.
Okay. All right. So then that's informational.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, it could just be pobrecito is not studying.
Right.
Or there are people that do horrible
but
tests.
After 192 times, don't you think you memorized the test?
I guess. I mean, there's some people that they're trying to do Guinness World Record. They're trying to break the record on purpose. And, you know, listen, I don't know the story. But what I will say is that if you find yourself in a situation like that where you have a goal and you seem to be, you know, not making it, you know, you have to take a step back and self-evaluate and be like, what is it? Is it me? Am I the problem? Am I the one that is doing something incorrectly? Are there outside factors that are influencing me to not allow me to be successful? And then because we are Christian and, you know, I always say it, we operate in duality. It could be straight up God. God doesn't want that for you. So when God doesn't want a certain thing for you, it really doesn't matter what you try, how many backflips you try to do to get it done. If he doesn't want it to work out, it's not.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a good segue.
So we'll see. Hopefully this man, we get an update, right?
Pobrecito. They should just give him an honorary one.
Yeah. You know, and I think in that same thread, right, the idea of, you know, trying to continue something and trying and not succeeding, all of that, you know, it's funny because you can relate the idea of a journey to so many different things, and the idea of trying something over and over again and trying to succeed and failing to so many different things, right? And I think that one of the areas that, especially as Christians, we find that same idea in is with the idea of trying to find our calling. Right? We hear this often about individuals who are out there trying to find their calling. What is my calling? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Well, you know, why am I on earth? What is my, you know, like, you know, reason and point for living? Like, what does God have me here for? And this is a very common question, right, that many individuals have about the idea of what is their calling. And so many people that really this becomes a major, I want to say, like stress in their life in trying to find it. Right. And feeling like they don't know what their calling is. Yeah. And it's similar to, like, you know, I teach high school, I teach 11th grade and 12th grade. And there are times where, you know, they don't know what they want to do. Right. And that's a scary thing for them. Yeah. Professionally. They don't know if they want to go to college, what college to go to, what they want to do, if they want to be a, you know, coach or a physical therapist or a teacher or this or that. Right. And it's like a big thing for them, a life decision that they have to make. And I see sometimes the stress or the panic or the worry that time is approaching, time is coming, and I need to make a decision. And I feel like at times that can be us, right? That
Yeah.
there are many individuals who just feel like, you know, I'm 25, I'm 35, I'm 45. What is my calling? What am I supposed to do? Did I miss my calling? Was I supposed to be doing this and living here and meeting this person or that person or being with this church in order to fulfill my calling? What is my calling? Right? And I think that is a very common question. I mean, have you ever asked yourself that, like growing up or even now? Have you ever?
I think for me it's different. I have never been of the school of what's my calling. I think for two reasons. I think the first one is that I've never felt like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing when it came, you know, for God and like church service and being of service to the church and the community and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been someone who's always been active. I've always been someone who, you know, if I'm not, you know, working with the directive, I am doing this or I'm doing that. And I'm always like up and about going. So I think that I've always thought that my calling was to just be of service.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a specific title. And obviously, you know, I do know what my calling is and that, you know, it does align with that as well. But growing up, it was never one of those things that I felt like, you know, what am I supposed to be doing? I just always felt like just be of service. So, you know, whatever that looks like, whatever opportunity arises or whatever need there is that you feel like you can help at, just do it. So I don't know. For me, I think it's a little weird. I know that people, not everybody shares that same experience. You know, I know that there are people that just kind of like find themselves like, hello, what am I supposed to do? But what was it like? What's it like for you?
I mean, I have to agree. I think for me, it's something I haven't really thought about or, you know, throughout the years, right, have given it a lot of thought in that way, right? Where it's like pressure, like what is my calling? What am I supposed to do? You know, because I feel like along the way, I've seen opportunities and I've seen certain doors open and I've kind of walked into them, right? And almost had the attitude of this is my calling for this moment or for the season, right? Like I am called to, you know, do spoken word from this time. I'm going to do it, right? I'm called to teach at this time. I'm going to do it, right? And I feel like, you know, there are also like different levels of callings. There could be professional calling, right? Like, you know, what is your calling in the workplace, right? As your career, you can be a teacher and impact lives. You can be a social worker and impact lives. You can be a mailman and impact lives. You know what I mean? So it's seeing that I also believe there is calling there in the professional field. When you look at ministry, right? There are different avenues and different lanes where one can operate and be effective in and have a calling, right? So I've always looked at it as, you know, there probably is an ultimate calling for me in my life, but for right now at 16, this is what I'm doing. And this is where I feel God has me. At 19, this is what I'm doing. This is what I feel God wants me to do and what God is leading me to do. And I'm going to do it, you know? And I think a lot of times what overwhelms people is the idea of the ultimate calling, right? So it's like they want to know, like, am I going to be a missionary across the world? Am I going to be a pastor? Am I going to be a teacher? Am I going to be, you know, serving in this capacity or doing this or doing that? And we think of the ultimate. Yeah. That sometimes it's almost like, you know, you can have that ultimate calling to be one of those things or do one of those things. But I believe there are also little things along the way and steps that you need to take before you get there. So your calling, your ultimate calling may be to be a missionary, right? But you saying yes to this position at your church is the first step, or you being obedient in your job is the first step, right? And it's trying to find, what does God have for me now at this moment, right? And that can be hard for some people, right? Not knowing whether or not God wants them to do a certain thing, if that aligns with their calling, you know, if it'll make sense. And like you said earlier, I think that's the duality of everything. You know, we know we have a calling. What is it? We know we have a calling. God, should I do this? You know? So it's one of those things where I think you definitely have to pray about it and ask God about, but should it stress you out and overwhelm you and bring you to a point where you just feel purposeless because you may not know or may not see a clear calling? I don't think so. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that that's also, you shouldn't feel pressure to have a declaration. You know, this isn't the end of the year where you have to declare, or this isn't when you're in college and you have to declare a major. You know, at the end of the day, you know, if everyone around you thinks or feels like they know what their ultimate calling is, well, then good for them. But for you, it could be different.
everyone's journey is different as well. You know, there are people that God lets them navigate the world, navigate life in a certain direction, and then in the future is like, hey, by the way, the reasons why I had you do X, Y, and Z is because it's gonna bring you to this. Yeah. This is ultimately what I want you doing. There's other people that from the minute they're born, they know tú vas a ser, you're gonna be a whatever, and their whole life is really wrapped around that idea, that declaration that was put over their life. But everybody's life is different, you know. But I do understand the idea, the feeling of wanting to be productive. You know, maybe you find yourself in church, or you find yourself in your youth group, in your men's ministry, your women's ministry, wherever, and you're like, you know, I feel like I should be doing more. You know, what can I be doing? What should I be doing? You know, what I want to be useful. You know, then there are things that you can like think about, and then those are questions that you pray about and you ask God for guidance with. And then there's certain things that you just got to step back. I always say, step back, reflect. You know, really like look at the scenario of what's happening and see where you fall in. Yeah.
And I think one of the first steps is to see what you're passionate about, right? A lot of people say, you know, where your passions lie, that says a lot about who you are and what you are meant to do, right? For some people, you know, they may have a passion in teaching, right? And that's their passion. They love working with people, and that's their passion. Well, how could that be a calling for you, right? What can you see yourself doing within the body of Christ or the kingdom of God in order where, you know, those passions that you have and that interest that you have, you know, is now serving a greater purpose, right? So I think it also takes a moment of reflection and seeing, what am I passionate about, right? And seeing, do these passions and interests align, you know, with what God has for my life and how I can use it for him. You know, I believe that God, you know, there are moments where God will, you know, maybe require something of you or have you do something or enter a season where you're doing something that can be uncomfortable, right? That you may not necessarily like, that may not be super interesting to you, but out of obedience, you do it, right? And it could be a test. It could be God testing your faith, your loyalty, your patience, right? But I truly believe that God sees what you are passionate about. There are individuals who love technology, who love social media, who love, you know, using graphics and animations and designs, and they just love that. That's their interest. I believe that those individuals who have those interests, God can really, you know, use them in the social media world, right? Whether it is creating videos, whether it is creating reels or social media posts for people, you know, churches, graphic designs for churches, flyers, so many different things where, you know what, that can be your calling. We see musicians, right? They love music. God can have you, you know, be a musician at a local church. God can have you be a musician for a band that's on tour, right? You know, I was looking at, you know, a channel of a musician. His name is Danny Lopez, and he is musicians for several different like groups like For King and Country and, you know, other groups like that. And he was saying how he started just playing in his basement, right? And he loved the drums, and now he, you know, plays drums on tour for different artists, bass, he produces music, produces albums, live productions, and he says it basically started with a passion and an interest in a basement, right? And a lot of times that could be our story, right? This started as something I enjoyed doing, and it turned into a calling for me. This turned into a life mission, right? And something that God used, right, to bless other people and not just me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, it's funny because, you know, I do have my artistic side. You know, I have my side where, you know, the artistry that I have within me comes out, all that fancy stuff or whatever. But I also find that, you know, and this aligns with the idea of finding out what you're passionate about, but then you also have to integrate what your gifts are, right? You know, I think that's also very important. You have to identify what is it that you bring to the table? What is your God-given gift? What are the things that you have? And I feel like a lot of times we think about the musician who knows how to play instruments, or the singer that has a beautiful voice. And I think that for me, you know, there are people that have the gift of administration. Yeah. You know, and what that means is that these are individuals that come into a place and can look at stuff and be like, you know what, that needs to get done, that needs to get fixed. Let's put this in order. Let's put this plan together. And I feel like those are one of my gifts. You know, it's not a fancy one. It's not a one that a lot of people like to talk about. But I thoroughly enjoy looking at a situation and being like, all right, we got to fix this. What can we do? Let's create a plan. Let's create an outline. Let's create a this. Let's do that, an attack plan, and let's knock it out the park. You may feel like, oh, I'm not talented. You know, I don't know how to sing. I don't know how to play an instrument. I barely know how to tell colors apart. How am I going to be a painter, right? You know, but there are other things that you bring to the table that people around you may not, you know, and that's important for you to identify. You can never belittle the things that you have within you. You know, if you're someone who's super mega organized, that's a gift. There's people that are not, you know, so then maybe what you need to do is to be like, you know what? I'm a very organized person, and I noticed that, you know, the supply closet at the church is a hot mess. I'm going to go in there, take a Saturday, and I'm going to fix that up. You know what? I'm a very organized person, and I noticed that our food pantry ministry is having issues with like organization. I think they could optimize the space better. I'm going to go help them out and do this. You know, it's really about understanding, you know, where can I help the most? You know, where can I be useful in? And sometimes it's not the flashy position. Sometimes it's a position that doesn't even have a title. There's no name for it. It's just the fact that you are being of service, and God is going to glorify himself in that, and God is going to bless you of that because you're using what you bring to the table to make things flow a lot better.
Yeah, and just because you are a Christian and a believer does not mean, right, that your ultimate calling is to be a pastor, right? And I feel like a lot of times, you know, we create these boxes where, you know, because I'm a Christian, because I'm young, because I'm this, because I'm that, you know, I could be a youth pastor. Like I could speak to like the young people, and I could, right? Or we look at, you know, because, you know, I've been in church all my life and grew up in church and, you know, all of that, I think I can be a pastor. I love, you know, the church, and, you know, I don't really speak right, or like, you know, can really like, I've never developed the message before or something, but I think I can learn how to do that, right? I think I, you know, and we get caught up in what we would like our calling to be, or what we think it has to be because we are a Christian, because we are a believer, right? Not everyone is called to be a pastor. Not everyone is called to be a church worship leader or a church musician or a church teacher. And that's okay, right? Your calling, right? You can't compare it to someone else's. You can't compare what God has for you with what God has with the people on your social media, right? So I think it's very important to recognize that not everyone's calling is the same or is going to look the same. And just because you are a Christian doesn't mean your ultimate calling is to do something on that capacity within the church. There are ways that God can use your creativity for his kingdom. There are ways that God can use your administration skills for his kingdom. That's not in the pastoral realm. That's not in the teaching realm, right? But it could be in a different way of service. There's greeting ministries, right? Like you said earlier, there's food pantry ministries, right? There's, you know, ministries that they visit, you know, nursing homes, or they visit shelters, or they visit jails, right? There are ministries out there that, you know, are heavily reliant on social media. And maybe that's where you can come in, right? So it's very, you know, because I remember growing up and hearing people and individuals, you know, talking about their calling and their purpose. And it was always like to be a pastor, evangelist, teacher, musician, traveling missionary. And it's like, God is not limited to those things. Absolutely. God is not limited to those callings, and just that's it, right? So it really takes for you to take a step back and analyze your life, reflect on your life and your feelings, and say, do I want this calling because it's what I think I need to do? Do I want this calling? Am I seeking after this calling because it's what's expected from me? You don't know how many times, simply because my dad is a pastor, people make the assumption that I will one day be a pastor. They don't know me, they don't know, but because my dad is a pastor, they immediately just pass that on to me, right? For all I know, that's I'm not going to be that, right? Or for all they know, I'm not going to do that, right? I have a brother Same thing with him, right? So it's like, it just because you may have a family history of a certain calling or something that your parents did or your siblings did doesn't necessarily mean that calling just automatically flows onto you.
Yeah.
Right? What God has for you is for you. What God has for the person next to you is for them. What God has for the people on your social media that you are constantly seeing, right, is different than what God may have for you.
Yeah.
And I feel like in that social media world, we see that, and it's very much like we want that, right?
Yeah.
And that may not necessarily be your calling.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that, excuse me, I'm recovering from something. I also think that on the flip side, when you do find, the niche, when you do find the need, when you do realize, what, my passion aligns with my gift and there's an opportunity for those two things to become something, you also have to be understanding in the fact that there is an educational part that comes with that.
Yeah.
You sometimes there are opportunities that you can't just jump into and you can just go head first into it. And then there's other opportunities that you really need to prepare for, whatever that looks like, whatever the field is, go watch a YouTube video, go read some books, go take a class, go do something, because I feel like, a side of, the flip side to that also is that we want to set ourselves up for success in those areas. We started off the podcast talking about a gentleman who has failed his driving test over 100 and something times.
92 times, yeah.
And, we don't know what his story is, but don't let his story be you. Don't be that. Don't be that individual who continuously finds themselves failing in an area, especially if they know that's what God has specifically called them for. Grace goes away, blessing goes away, God's mercy goes away, not goes away, but goes a long way also. Yeah. But you definitely have to put your part in that area. So if it's teaching, if it's singing, if it's administration, if it's organization, if it's helping, whatever it is, make sure you're doing it to the best of your ability.
Yeah. And there's also an element where you may try something and fail. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's not your calling.
Yeah.
Right. So there is an element of you may have to try that thing a few times. You may have to learn from your mistakes. Right. But then there's also the idea of maybe this isn't it. Right. And it's being honest with yourself.
Oh, yes.
Right. When you know something isn't working and you know that something isn't right, but you're trying to make it work because of pride or ego or because what are people going to say? Or, I've always wanted to be a pastor. I want that. I want that
or maybe
spotlight.
The season is over.
Or,
maybe there was a season where
absolutely.
That's what you were supposed to be doing. But that season is done.
Yeah.
You need to move on.
Yeah, move on and accept that, you know what, that chapter may be over. What does God have for you next? And don't get so caught up in what you thought you were going to be doing or what you've done for so long that you miss the new thing that God wants to do with your life. So it's this idea that, yes, you may try something and fail, right? Start over, start again, try again. But if deep down inside, you are trying to do something and you have that feeling, because anytime you are doing something outside of God's will or outside of God's timing, or maybe, like you said, that season's over, you feel it deep down inside. And for whatever reason, there's a plethora of reasons where you may try to just keep it together and try to keep it going. But if you are in that place, recognize that chapter may be done. That story, that part of your story may be complete, right? What is the next thing God has for you? Look for that next thing. And, keeping that in mind, I believe that, God will definitely give you the clarity you need. God will give you the door that you need to be open, the opportunity that you need, and it will make sense. It will feel right. It will feel like this is what God wants you to do, So I think this is, like we said, it's a common question about our calling that many people have. And, at a certain point, if you've asked yourself that, or if you're asking yourself that right now, we hope, that our words have just kind of encouraged you to, take a seat back, to think, reflect, and, maybe what you thought and expected your calling was going to be, it's just going to be something else. And that's okay.
Absolutely. So just think about it. What are you passionate about? What are the gifts that God has given you? And where is the greatest opportunity for you to be of service? Whether it is to your community, whether it is to your church, whether it is to your family, whatever it is, look at those 3 points, evaluate it. And I'm pretty sure that with that, aligned with prayer, you're definitely going to find the direction God wants you to walk in.
Absolutely. So we hope today's conversation has encouraged you. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are not subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. You can follow us on Facebook and on Instagram at God Life Culture Podcast. And we hope to see you at our family conference, As For Me in My House, happening March 10th through the 12th. And submit your questions if you have any on mental health, the family, raising children. If you're thinking about raising children, right? All of those things, we definitely want to hear from you.
Yeah, so thank you once again for tuning into the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. That's God Life Culture. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye. My voice is